Most of us work hard, we pay our taxes and dream about a comfortable retirement. But it will come as a shock to many when they discover they have nowhere near enough of their superannuation and will be forced to go on the government pension.
Our next guest saw her parents work tirelessly only to retire poor. To avoid the same fate, she and her husband decided to invest in property. They started with one and now have 25. In order to explain how that's possible, with property investment schemes collapsing all around us and housing affordability the tightest it's ever been, we're joined by Wendy Priestley.
Good morning, Wendy.
Thank you.
Now you're going to... Sorry.
I was going to say, do you have to be a multi-millionaire to own 25 properties?
Well, I suppose...
Or have a multi-million-dollar income from a standard job?
No, my husband and myself were people in the suburbs. We worked in government positions on average salaries, but knowing the strategies and treating it as a professional approach rather than a hobby means that you've got better strategies to move forward, and the results down the track are as they are.
You have 25 properties.
We do.
You started with one. Is it important to own them? I mean, is that your intention, to own them outright?
You mean pay off?
Yes,
properties?
Yes, exactly.
No,
sorry.
not at all. We don't pay them off. We don't pay principal. We pay our loans as interest only, and that means that we see the capital growth accumulating. Over the history of property growth in Australia and other places, you see on average well-located property is doubling every 7 to 10 years. And most people who own their own home have a view that they need to pay it off. But from an investment point of view, it's a better approach to accumulating a large sum to not pay it off.
You said a very telling thing there, though. Well-located property. Is that essential?
Well, absolutely. I mean, no one would go into a business and just expect the business to be stagnant. And so with property, what you're doing for an investment property, you're looking to buy property that's going to appreciate in capital growth and rental return. And those particular properties are well located in major capital cities and regional areas where people are going, people are being employed, infrastructure, facilities, hospitals, schools are there so that you will have available tenants.
OK, so how do you make money and have a wage coming in then if you're not selling a property? How does that work?
Well, you have property that you have borrowed against. You have tenants in that property.
So you have a negative gearing aspect?
Yes, we do. And over time, because the property is well located and you have good capital growth, those tenants are willing to pay you a higher price as time goes on, and it then enables you, as the growth of property and the growth of rental increases, that you can then accumulate another property and so on. It sort of compounds.
There must have been hurdles for you, though.
Major hurdles.
Along the way. I mean,
yes.
did you go into this originally thinking we'll go for well-located property, or was that something that you realised, having made a few mistakes?
No, we learned that along the way.
Yeah.
Back in the mid-90s, we were reading many books on property. In terms of building up an asset base, property was a good vehicle for investment. And so, like most average property investors, you just go and buy something close to home. And usually that's a poor investment choice. It may not necessarily be in a high growth area, it may not be necessarily good for rental location, and so you make those mistakes, and what happens with the average investor is that they generally only own 1 or 2 properties, or becomes too hard. They don't know the strategies to handle bad tenants, bad property managers, problems with strata, problems with council, and so then I'll sell the property's a problem, rather than seeing themselves as the problem. When people buy an expensive car, they don't expect not to take it for service, not to put new tyres on. And so the same with property, you learn to manage those.
And you also joined an investment club, which I'd never heard about. So tell us about it. I think it's a fascinating idea.
Well, the club was set up back in 1995 by a chap by the name of Kevin Young, who at a school reunion had been retired for quite a number of years, and whose friend said, "Kev, how come you've retired and you weren't necessarily the brightest person at school, and yet we've got all these degrees and, you know, we're still struggling?" And he said, "I'll show you how to buy correct investment property. Not every property is a good investment. It just happens to be a property that's for sale, and most people buy them through their local real estate agents close to home." So he showed his friends, and then that grew to, started in Brisbane, grew around Australia, and we now have members all around the world buying property in Australia and New Zealand. We
all learning from each other.
Absolutely. We support each other. It's a support network. We learn how to buy well-located, or the club sources well-located property. When we're looking at finance, we're shown and educated how to get the right, appropriate finance, how to manage those problems so that most of our members hold 4 times as many properties as the average person.
But speaking of finance, where do you go? Do you just go to the bank, or because generally I would imagine the banks aren't that keen on lending money to someone who's got so many properties?
Well, in the beginning, when we were doing it on our own, we found it very difficult to move beyond 2, because when we would go to the bank, our personal banker, I found it really difficult to comprehend the first time.
Just then,
was the person on the other side said to me, "Wendy, you've got these properties. How come you're buying so many properties?" And I said, "But don't you know how to buy properties?" "Oh, no." So it sort of came to me in the early days that banking
You
is
were
simply...
educating them.
Yes, they're simply selling a product. They're simply selling finance, as opposed to knowing how to build a business, how to build up that business, which is your property business. And then what we do is look at using banking policy, having loans with different lenders, so our risk is spread, their risk is spread. But you've got to understand that most banks have an interest for their shareholders. They're not necessarily going to give you the best deal, and their products may not be the best deal for your investment property. So you need to have a spread of lending products that are going to suit you over time. And, of course, banks will change their lending products over time and
move around. Are you a finance whiz?
Well, I handle the family budgets, I handle our property portfolios, and anyone who might think that a property portfolio is going to take some time and, you know, I don't have that time, well, maybe they shouldn't be an investor. Because if you had a business, a $10 million business with, you know, $500,000 worth of income coming through that business, you would take some time to make sure that all is in place. You'd also take some time to understand the rules and the legislation. We own properties all around Australia, and there are different property ownership laws in the different states, and if you're not on top of them, it can be very difficult. But what we see with property is that we are in control. We're chairman of the board, sort of our own properties, and we can improve those properties, and the tenants then pay us more rental.
You are an inspiration.
I was just going to say that.
Yep, absolutely. I want to know the name of the investment club. I'm in.
All right,
Thank you for your time this morning, Wendy.
Thank you very much.
Lovely to meet you.